Welcome to Rome. This is The Bittersweet Life with Katie Sewell and Tiffany Parks. Hello, this is The Bittersweet Life. I'm Katie Sewell.
I'm Tiffany Parks.
Tiffany in Rome, Katie in Seattle. And today, we're going to talk about how what we know and what we notice in the world can shape how we see things. Which sounds very vague, but we're going to dig into this a little bit. It's almost like the lens upon which we look at things can shape not only how we understand things, but how we see things, is sort of the idea.
Mm-hmm.
And I have many different examples to try to make this clearer. So I guess, let me just give you one, okay? When I think back to myself as a younger person, there are so many things that I don't know, okay? Like when I think about who I was in high school or what I thought going into college or all of these things, I realize like how much of what I was thinking was missing is what it feels like. It's missing information, you know, it's missing a larger perspective. And I think that's part of being a younger person. But then as you move through life and you pick up different things, that can shape what your thinking is also. So for example, when I was a college student trying to figure out like what in the world I wanted to do with my life, I was not particularly interested in the news or the happenings of the world, okay? It wasn't that I wasn't interested. I just felt like I didn't really see yet the bigger picture of how does this apply to me when it comes to like politics or decisions that the local city council is making, or I just sort of felt like that's those people's jobs. I'm going to go ahead and do my thing. And I did still subscribe to the local paper, which I would read every day. So it wasn't like I didn't know what was going on, but my favorite thing about that paper was like the funny headlines, the quirky stories. And sometimes I would cut those out and be like, maybe this is fodder for a short story I might one day write. You know, it was almost like I read the paper to try to find fun tidbits that I might use in my own art. There was an article in the Bellingham Herald once about a man who was saved from a fire by his cat repeatedly punching him in the face, you know, and like just he woke up to the cat screaming and smashing him in the face with both paws. And that's how he woke up and realized that his house was on fire. And I thought, I'm going to cut that out. There's something there, you know. What was probably more important was what the city council was doing, you know, or like what was happening in the local community. But at that time, I didn't really care. So fast forward to me wanting to get a job in radio and deciding that the best radio in town was probably National Public Radio. They were the people who were doing the most innovative stuff. They were the people that had the best art programs. I thought I did not get into it because I loved the news and wanted to be a journalist. However, by doing that, I had to like learn the discipline of what it was to like work in a journalistic outfit. And that required reading books and taking classes and failing on the job and, you know, being talked to and taught by other people and learning to all the reasons why good journalism matters, I guess, and like what it takes to pull it off. And now that I've had to make that a major part of my career, I now have that as a kind of pervasive lens of how I see my life, you know, how I experience the life around me. And in this time of massive misinformation, it has served me well because I don't freak out about stuff I see on social media or weird video memes and stuff, because unless I know it's coming from a reputable source and I can prove that to myself, I'm like, well, we don't know that this is true. I will look to see if I can find out if it's true. But I am thankful for that because I don't think everybody has that. I think we're living in kind of like this gut reaction. Now, I don't mean to turn this political. That was just a way that it like tweaked what I had to be able to do and what I had to be able to see to be able to function in the world, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. But what actually I was thinking while you were telling the story, it's the same point, but it's a different aspect of the point.
Mm-hmm.
You reading the paper as a young person and noticing stories that you could use to write something, that is another example of what you're talking about, I think.
Yeah.
because only writers do this, or people who are, aspiring writers, or, a screenwriter, anybody who writes something, who creates stories for a living, fiction. I feel like we always have our antenna up, just waiting for like some really great idea. Because of course there are no original ideas, really.
Mm-hmm.
There really aren't. We've all been telling the same stories for millennia, right? With various details changed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I personally get a lot of my ideas from ancient Rome, from Renaissance Rome, from art, from things that I see. I'm the same exact way that you are describing yourself when you're reading the local paper and cutting out these things and thinking, I could use this for a short story.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was studying for the tour guide exam and walking down, I think it was in Ostia or in the Via Appia Antica or somewhere where there were a lot of tombs. And I remember the teacher sort of explaining this story about this child and this interesting tombstone. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, I got to write that down because that would make such a great story. And that is something that if you are a writer or
Mm-hmm.
someone who has that, that creative urging, then you're looking out for stuff like that. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like that's what you're talking about. It's like it's your antenna, like which way do they turn and why
Mm-hmm.
is what I'm getting from this
Yeah,
talk. Maybe
yeah.
maybe I'm interpreting it wrong, but
No,
that's what it
yeah, I guess which
feels
way
like.
do they turn and why, and how that can be done for like good or for ill, too. Like, because I think that
Mm-hmm.
you can spend your time in your life so that your antenna are kind of turning in the wrong direction, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and that is something that I'm always I guess on guard against for myself. But even I know that I waste time in ways that turn my antenna in the wrong direction. Yeah, I mean, just finishing that thought of the journalistic thing, like sometimes I think your ideas are shaped too by what you learn when you don't quite get something right. I don't know if you have an example of this, but like when I was kind of like a new person and here I am trying to act like a journalist, and what do I know? I'm like, okay, Katie, you're covering such and such an issue. Go figure out who the players are and then bring us back the story, essentially. And I remember being assigned to this story that was, I guess they probably thought was good starter material for a young person like
Cub
myself.
reporter.
Exactly. And it was basically just about this fight over this one park in Seattle. And their park council, I don't remember who the people were. They weren't the park council, but whoever they were, the people who were in charge of building this park, right? I had them on one side in my head, okay? And then we had the people who were fighting them, and those were the skateboarders. And the skateboarders were fighting them because while they were developing the plans for how to develop this park, they had allowed these skateboarders to like build a skate bowl. You know what a bowl is, right?
I know.
Okay. They had allowed them to build one of those in this park. And it had become like a spot that was so well done that skateboarders all over the city were seeking it out. And here they were going to come through. They're like, okay, we're done with the plans. We're going to rip this out now and we're going to build the park of our dreams. And the skateboarders were like, well, why would you rip out the best bowl in the city? And they got into this clash. They got into a war with each
Mm-hmm.
other. So I'm like, okay, great. I got the skateboarder side and I got the side of the park building people. And I'm just about to go to the air with this. And this woman calls me up and she's just furious. And I don't know how she's gotten word that I'm doing this story. And I barely feel like I know what's going on. So I feel like completely flabbergasted on how to deal with her. And she's like, you're missing an entire part of the story. You can't go to air with this. And I'm like, well, what's the other part of the story? And she's like, there's us, this other group who are the ones that fought the park council people to let the skaters build this bowl on the promise from the skaters that they would tear it down when the time came.
Oh, the
And
plot
she goes, and she's
thickens.
like, and they have betrayed us. I get why they want to keep it. And I have always been on their side, but this was the deal we made. This was the deal we brokered. And she's like, if you leave us out, you leave out this, huge part of what happened. And for me, that was like, oh crap, all the more reason to like double check. It was a huge life lesson for me to be like,
Well,
oh,
that's the
you
thing
think
about
you knew.
mistakes.
Yeah. You think you knew and you got it all wrong.
Yeah, I always tell that to Aurelio because when he gets, down on himself for making too many mistakes, whether it's playing the piano on a test or something. And I'm just like, the mistakes are what teach you. That's what you're going to remember. You're not going to remember the questions you got right because you got them right. So you don't have to think about them anymore. You're going to remember the things you did wrong. And that's how
Mm-hmm.
you're going to learn.
Mm-hmm.
It's what you taught me about the percent, what was it, the 13% or the 16% rule, where if you're making mistakes 13 to 16% of the time, that's when learning is optimized.
Yeah, I can't remember the percentage, but that was from our Therese Houston book. Yeah, you'd have to go back and
Yes.
find that interview.
Yeah, that stuck with me. I think that's very interesting. So
Yeah,
don't
that
feel
there's
too
an
bad
there's
because
an
you had a
optimal.
great learning lesson.
Well, and I think it was probably the most important lesson. And particularly, in these weirdly charged political times across the entire globe, is that we had gotten into this thinking of there's one side and there's the other, but there's not. There's like 1,000 sides,
Yeah,
and
and
how do you
then it
find
gets
them?
tricky as well when two things are true at the same time.
I mean, 15 things are often true at the same time. And 15 is just an arbitrary number, by the way. But like, yeah, there's like 1,000 truths in some cases. It's just
Hmm.
because we all have our own truth, which is sometimes true and sometimes not true.
Yeah.
And then there's all this different sides of the story and all the layers and all the history and like, oh my gosh, like every issue is so complicated. And that's why you have to like look for who are the people who really know, versus the
And do any of the people, including the people who might really know, do any of them have an agenda?
true. That's true. In these times, many of them do have an agenda, of course. Um, but I mean, we could take it on a lighter level.
Hmm.
Like I always encourage people on this show to notice the birds. And I don't know, have you noticed birds more since I've been pointing that out? Would you
I
say?
think I do. I think I do notice birds more than I used to. I was listening to you and your sisters talk about birds and when you started noticing them. And you said you started noticing them young, not like most people are in their 30s start noticing the birds. You're like, no, no, no. I was like 10 and I was noticing the birds, not 4, but 10. And I was thinking, I really was noticing the birds at 4. He's a bird person like you. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember taking him to Scuola Materna. So that's like 3, 4 years old. And he's like, Mama, there's a robin redbreast in the tree. And he recently noticed a bird in his school garden when I was picking him up. That's the little bird that I always am trying to figure out what it is. And it's so quick and it's so afraid of humans and it's very small that I've never been able to get a decent picture of it to be able to look up or ask someone what this bird is.
Mm.
I've described it to you in the past. It's black and white and it's very small and it's got quite a long tail. But I
Mm.
cannot for so he noticed that. I was like, that's the bird. That's the one. But yeah, I do think I notice birds more. And I was thinking about kids and how, you were saying how when you were, a young person, you had so little experience, you had so little knowledge. So kids, because they have, I mean, I don't have any science to back this up, but people talk about how perceptive children are.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm convinced that the reason is because, and people have said this is not an original thought, but they have no filter, right? They don't filter out all of the background noise and all of
Mm.
that. We as adults, we filter out so much stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, and I was mentioning to you earlier, the reticular activating system. Those are the things that don't get filtered. Your name, the type
Well,
of cat you
well,
have, the
first,
type of
first,
car you have.
wait, tell everyone what that is, because you texted that to me, and I was like, huh? And I did look it up after that, but please give
I
us an
knew you would.
explanation.
So the reticular activating system, it's an official term. Like I don't know who came up with this. I don't know how they proved it. Don't ask me to like quote the science for you because that's not my line. But but I'm not making this up. So this is real stuff, scientific proven and et cetera, et cetera. But the basically it's the thing that I don't know how to describe it other than to say we have a filter because we cannot take in everything that we see and everything that we hear. We would become, I don't know, we would go nuts. So we have this filter and we miss a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But there are certain things that go through that filter. Things like your name or your spouse's name or your child's name, your car, like or similar car to yours. If you have a certain type of animal, maybe like an animal that looks like if you have a poodle, you're going to notice poodles more than you're going to notice other dogs.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a white Honda, especially as soon as you get that car, you're going to start noticing it everywhere you go. So obviously this is something that is built on experience and on our lives and on the years and years that we're living and experiencing things. But little kids do not have this.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why you see these, babies or toddlers, they're looking at something. You're like, what are you looking at? Like sometimes you're just staring off into space and you could just say, oh, well, they're just zoning out, but they're probably actually looking at something that you have completely missed.
Mm-hmm.
And it might just be a bug on the window,
Right.
something that you would never see. And I think that's such an interesting thing about children. And Aurelio because he doesn't have it as much anymore because he's 10. So the younger the child is, the more they notice random stuff, just like tiny, tiny, tiny little details. But
Mm-hmm.
he will sometimes say like, "Oh yeah, this," and he will have noticed something that I say it to him all the time. I'm like, "How in the world did you notice that?" I wish I could give you an example
Mm-hmm.
because it happens all the time, but I'm just like, "How is it possible that you noticed that? Like you saw that
Yeah.
one time, and you noticed that, this thing was moved. It was here yesterday. It was on this side, and today it's on that side, or something like that."
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's
Um,
interesting too because as a parent, you probably start to shape what it is that they're noticing over time. Like if they're becoming like less, I don't know, open or say random to their observations, you have to argue that like whatever you do as a parent can start to shape what it is that they're focused on. Like I have a friend who I don't even know what you call it, but it's basically like the reason why they put those warnings in theater where they say flashing lights are in this play,
mhm.
because she can't look at flashing lights. It could like give her a migraine, in worst case, it could give her like a minor seizure or something like that. So she has to cover her eyes when any flashing light stuff starts to happen. That's fine, except she has a daughter who, of course, for years has watched her do this, like cover up her eyes when flashing starts.
Mm,
And now her daughter will also cover her own eyes when flashing starts.
that makes
I don't
sense.
know if that's from solidarity. I don't know if she feels like something bad could happen to her as well. But obviously, that has shaped her daughter's context in that area. And so, of course, it feels like any parent would have that same thing. Like,
Yeah.
I've argued for years that you need to reshape your thinking on spiders, right? Now, you
Mm,
probably have shaped Aurelio's thinking on
I
spiders.
have, and I feel terrible about it. And tell him all the time. I say, I really, just because I'm afraid of spiders does not mean you have to be afraid of spiders. I said, I have an irrational fear of spiders. I know it's not going to hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's not a threat. I'm afraid of it. It's irrational. It's a phobia. There's no reason to be afraid of the spider. And
Yes.
he's like, I know, but I still hate them.
But
And I
that's
know,
because
I
he
feel
loves
bad about it.
you. That's because he loves you.
I know. I feel bad about it, but I've tried, but
Yeah.
I
And
haven't. Maybe when he gets older, he'll be able to put that to
well,
rest.
and I strongly also believe that like it's not just what we put our focus and attention to or the lessons that we have to learn in life. I do think that we can truly brainwash ourselves into thinking one way or the other about anything. And that is also the danger, like, because you can do it accidentally. I think that
Mm.
that happens a lot in social media. You can do it accidentally, or you can do it deliberately. Like, you could see every time you see a spider, just think, I love this thing. Even if you know it's not true, you
Oh.
could be like, oh, I love this. I love this. I love this so much, until it actually
Or just say, "You're
becomes
so cute."
true. Yeah, isn't
Try
it
to tell
cute?
myself
Yeah, or like, look at, oh my gosh, isn't it remarkable? It's got all these legs that work in unison, or like, whatever it is that you have to like keep telling yourself. You can definitely like reshape how you think about things. I was giving you an example when I was trying to describe to you what the heck I wanted to talk about today, and that was that I used to be a smoker as a younger person, and it did not make me feel healthy. But I loved smoking. I loved it. Like I set out to like be a smoker from the dawn of time. I can remember being a kid being like, can't wait till I grow up and can be a smoker.
No, I want to know. Wait, before you tell me about what you're going to tell me, why?
Why did I
I'm
want to be a
just
smoker?
curious. Why did you want to be a smoker? Because I think usually that happens when you see your parents smoking. And I don't think your parents were smokers, at least not when you were after you were born.
No, my grandfather was a smoker though. I just thought it was cool. Honestly, like I just thought it was cool. It seemed like a cool and relaxing thing to do, kind of a rebellious thing to do. I thought people who smoked had like a certain kind of edge to them that I liked, that I guess I identified with in some way. I don't know. I mean, it was heavily marketed to us as kids, too. I don't know if you recall, but it wasn't like we had all these laws on the books yet being like, don't market cigarettes to children. We were marketing cigarettes to children, no question about it. We had the Marlboro Man and we had Joe Camel, it was a cartoon camel.
I remember Joe Camel.
I mean, he comes a little later. We're not like children when he comes around, but yeah, I mean, it was like all around us. Everywhere you went, people smoked. Every restaurant you were in, there were like cigarette machines where you could put a couple coins in and pull one out. It was just everywhere. It was all around us. And I just thought, seems pretty cool. And so, yeah, the moment I could give it a try, I did. And of course, it's highly addictive. So eventually I get to the point where I realize like I've got to quit doing this because I'm in my 20s and I feel old because it really starts to drag on your body after a while. But, I also loved it. And so that was the first moment when I realized, like, you can brainwash yourself into anything. Because I just read this book that was called, I believe, The Easy Way to Quit Smoking. Which, by the way, there is no easy way to quit smoking. It is the hardest thing in the world to do. But
you know what Mark Twain says about quitting smoking?
No, what does he say?
He says, quitting smoking is the easiest thing in the world. I've done it so many times.
Yeah. Yeah, I could say the same thing. I mean, I think I read somewhere once that the average person, this is the average, it takes a person 7 times of trying to quit before they actually have any kind of success.
Wow.
Anyway, and I definitely found that to be true. But anyway, so I read this book, and this entire book basically is trying to brainwash you into believing differently about it than you do. It tries to strip all the pleasure out of it. It tries to just emphasize everything that's terrible about it. It makes you do these exercises where you have to look in the mirror and tell yourself terrible things about it. You have to save all your cigarette butts in a jar with the lid closed, and whenever you feel like you want to smoke, you have to take a giant sniff of that jar. All sorts of things that make you start to feel like,
really.
Yeah, make you feel like, oh, this is awful. And it is like just a step-by-step brainwashing of reshaping how you think about it. And that was when I first realized, like, oh, well, you could use that for anything. You could use that for anything. Yeah. And that's why you could do it for spiders.
Yeah. I don't know that I mean, I don't know if it's worth the effort. Like, I don't know.
It's totally
what
worth
am I
the
effort.
It's worth it to the
benefits.
It's worth it to the spider.
Quitting smoking seem to vastly outweigh the benefits of stopping hating spiders.
Not to the spider.
But I'll tell you what, we do not have a lot of spiders over here.
That's true.
So I don't kill spiders. And if there is a spider in the house, I will have Claudio take care of it. And he generally, if he can, any kind of insect, except for mosquitoes, obviously, he will try to free outside. So I'm not like going around like I was when I was a little girl growing up on Lake Washington, vacuuming up all the hundreds of spiders in the house.
Yes.
Which is how my mother and I dealt with spiders when I was a little girl. She probably passed on her fear of spiders to me.
Yes.
That's probably where I got it. Or perhaps it was just growing up where there were so many big spiders.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, the spiders here in the Pacific Northwest in Seattle are, well, I mean, most of them are not massive, but there is one kind that we have that's quite large. Those of you in Australia understand this stuff. Those of you in Vietnam,
the ones
etc.
in Australia are a different level.
Yes.
But for being spiders and not tarantulas, they're huge and they're thick-legged. And,
and they're fast.
I can't even believe I just say it. Oh my God. See, just the thought, just you saying that, like I'm getting the creeps over here right now.
Okay.
I'm like, my skin is crawling.
Well, we can stop talking about it.
Please, let's do. Well, I love the idea of brainwashing myself, though. I mean, on something else, like I'm like, what could I do that? I mean,
well, I think you have.
It's just a very interesting.
I think you have
topic.
in like anybody who knows what your reading list has been for the last couple of years. You have. I wouldn't say necessarily it's brainwashing yourself because you've been reading great literature, but you have been like retraining your reading attention span by doing that. So it is like,
Yeah,
it
that's
is
true.
changing your perspective of like how much tolerance you have for a book. Whereas people who are only ever reading the paper on their phones don't have a lot of tolerance for a long book, you know?
I mean, it helps that they're really good books.
That's true, but I think even so, in today's like modern era, it takes a discipline, I think, to do it, maybe.
For sure. I mean, for sure. But it's also a habit. I always tell people who are like, "Oh, I wish I read more, but I just never have the time, or I just don't feel like it." Or I always tell people it's a habit. It is nothing but a habit. You get into this habit and it becomes easy.
Yep.
But no, it's funny because I just happened to be at the hospital at the doctor's office. I mean, it was at a hospital, but it wasn't like an emergency visit or anything. But Aurelio had to have a specific type of checkup, and I always bring my book with me when I have to be at a doctor's office, obviously, right? Because you're going to be
Yeah.
sitting there for like who knows how long. And I had it in my hand, my arms, really, because I'm reading War and Peace right now, right?
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah.
It's huge. And like was standing up like and I put it down on the doctor's desk so that like I could get my purse and get my coat back on. And he just kind of looked down at it because it was right in front of him. Like it's a big, hefty book. And he just kind of looked down on it. And he gave me this look that like I wish I could describe. I don't know how to describe this look. It's a very Italian look. He just kind of went, did you see me?
Yeah.
It's
Big,
kind of
it's like kind of
wow.
pinching your lips and really big eyes, like, whoa.
Like and kind of frowning,
Well,
not
yeah,
frowning
like
in a
it's
mean
kind
way,
of
but
a,
like a
it's kind of like a,
wow.
well, look at you kind of look.
Exactly.
Well, my.
Yeah. And he was like, wow, that's an interesting, light reading you've got there.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, and Claudia was there as well, and he's like, kind of, agreeing, and I was like, it's really an easy read to be honest. And Claudia was like, come on, and I'm like, no, I'm serious. It's flying by. Not that I'm reading it quickly, but
Yeah.
it's engaging, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think that if you're not used to reading something like that, you maybe have a hard time finding that engaging. So yes, it is a question of training yourself, and it can be hard at first.
But even that perspective that, oh, it's so long, so, oh, I couldn't possibly, that is a particular point of view based on like how we are today, you know?
Yeah.
At least that's my guess. I don't know. But brainwashing, if you're going to talk about that, like, gosh, that goes in all directions. You can't say you love the idea of brainwashing because we're subtly doing it to ourselves in a bunch
only
of
if it's
terrible
positive.
ways. Yeah.
Only in a positive way. It like and in intentional and positive way. Well, I consider myself, I mean, you talk about Aurelio and the spiders. I do try to not brainwash him. Okay, that's not the right expression, but I do try to influence him without being over the top and without being like
Mm-hmm. Like,
I
you
do
must do
kind of
this, you must do that. Yeah.
well, it's not just that. It's I'm trying to in a very subtle way influence the way that he thinks about himself.
Mm-hmm.
For example, he'll sit down to play the piano and he's not a lover of the piano. Okay, Aurelio plays the piano because we insist that he plays the piano because it's important in my opinion to study a musical instrument. But he's okay. He I don't want to say enjoys it. He sometimes enjoys it and he finds it really hard as well. And sometimes I'll just say, oh, honey, if it were easy, everybody would do it. Everybody would do it. This is hard, but you can do it. You can do hard stuff. That's me brainwashing him to, for lack of a better term, that he is the type of person who can do hard things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that if you get that input in childhood, that really does have an effect on you going forward. I mean, just think about the opposite case. How many young people have been verbally abused and told that they're worthless
Yep.
as kids?
Mm-hmm.
And they grew up believing that.
Yep. Yeah. And then you have to like start training yourself to not believe that as time
Yeah.
goes on, to be like, what they were saying was not the truth. I mean,
Mhm.
that's ultimately what it is like thinking about how what you do know and what you don't know shapes your perspective on life. For me, it's almost like a encouragement to be like, okay, your perspective is totally shaped by what you do know, but it's also somehow shaped by what you don't know. And so how do you like keep learning? How do you keep expanding your perspective without accidentally falling into expanding it in ways that are not right or helpful, you know?
Okay, say stay off of social media.
Well,
Go back to reading the newspaper.
everybody pick up
Um,
War and Peace. Yeah.
no, you don't have to go that far, but I would definitely say, yeah, read the newspaper and get your news from a newspaper instead of from social media. I'm
Mm-hmm.
totally number one culprit on that as well.
Yeah.
But I think that that's a very pernicious force in our lives. I really do. And the younger you are, I think the worse it is for you because you don't have the experience that you have that I have in other ways to be like, this doesn't sound right. You know,
Mm-hmm.
when you're younger, you just kind of take it all in.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Well, we should leave it there. Go see what the birds are doing just because that's my way of influencing you this afternoon. Maybe they're hunkering down because it's so cold where you are. But either way, we'll leave it there. And until next time, this is The Bittersweet Life. I'm Katie Sewell.
I'm Tiffany Parks.
Join us again. Bye. If you love the show, help spread the word to others by giving us a quick 5-star review wherever you listen. We love reading your comments and compliments. They are like fuel to the work. Thanks for taking the time.